I'd like you to think about 5 concepts as we go along for the rest of the day. Uncle Caslino, I'm assuming everybody here has an uncle. Leadership, a topic relevant to everybody, whether you're a one-man business or you work for a larger company. Grandpa, with a bit of luck, everybody knows of a grandpa, at least once. Hakuna Matata, hands up who've heard the phrase Hakuna Matata. Good. And a man whose name is Rock. Now you may not have ever known of a man called Rock, but by the end of today, you will know a man called Rock. When I was a young boy, in fact, from when I was born, this man, Thomas Joseph Caslino, who we called Uncle, he was not a relative but a very, very close family friend, for some reason or the other, identified in me someone he could talk to about things the rest of the community, adults, let alone children, could be interested in. Now, I think that's rather special, and what I learned from that was today I am learning to identify something special in individuals that I meet. You never know where that'll take you. And if I am the person I am today, it is because of the perspective, the outlook I have on anything I do. And I owe it all to Uncle Caslino. He talked to me about the rich knowledge from ancient and ageless wisdom traditions. We don't often learn about that even in school. Even our history doesn't teach us about that. History is mostly about facts. He began to teach me, now bearing in mind, I've known him from when I was born, but even before the age of 7, he would talk to me about psychology, about how people think the way they think, how people act through their emotions and react through other people's emotions. That's powerful stuff. He talked to me about philosophia, where the word philosophy comes from. Philo, love. Sophia, knowledge, the love of knowledge. Just learning for the sake of learning to grow. He taught me about theosophia. Literally translated, it means God knowledge, but it actually means divine wisdom. Nothing to do with organized religion. Right? So all the deeper stuff on the side of man. And he talked about strange things like the self and ego. And don't we see that in our daily lives, particularly when we're in business trying to work with other people? And the most powerful thing was, he taught me about looking at a human being as more than just what we see. That is at the heart of what drives me to do what I do today. And he began to engage me in conversations about masters, great leaders, and teachers. And that was with me all through my life. So I'm well over 60, and that has influenced my thinking and my perspective on how I see other people who present themselves as leaders, and how others who don't have the title are actually leading people. That's huge. Leadership for me is not something you can buy or read about. Leadership comes about when a human being transcends his or herself to reach those depths, those heights of the essence of what it is to be human. At that level, one is close to what we call human potential. Now, from that perspective, there exudes in a human being a magnanimity from one person to another and beyond. And it is that magnanimity, that energy, that vibration that triggers in another a welling up, a rising up of reciprocal energy that is translated as inspiration. And it is that inspiration that motivates the other to actually take action and do something. Leadership is not about someone telling somebody else what to do. Leadership is about inspiring the potential in the individual to come out and do something for themselves. That's not taught in leadership schools today, which is sad. Leadership schools today tend to teach you, follow the script, and then use your own personality to drive things through. And it saddens me when I see leaders in top companies actually default to that kind of behavior where the people that work for them are just widgets. And even as small businesses, the people we have conversations with are human beings. Right? It all started for me as I was growing up as a child, having been born on the island of Mombasa in Kenya. And that's where I did all my formative schooling. And I used to walk up and down that street quite often with Grandpa, right? And Grandpa was known to many people, and as we would walk along, there were lots of people calling out and exchanging greetings. But Grandpa always stopped to talk to one particular person. And by all accounts, he did that every day over several years. And it wasn't just a hello, how are you? It was an in-depth conversation, and sometimes he'd be standing there with this person for a couple of hours. Now, this person was someone society called a beggar. And he sat just about there. Now, the Swahili word for beggar is Maskini. Maskini was actually born a victim of polio and would never walk for the rest of his life. His only movement was lifting his body with his hands and swinging his body forward and moving. Right? And for some reason or the other, Grandpa took to Maskini. And when you see how poverty and beggars are treated in different parts of the world, they're almost discarded. Whereas Grandpa thought, no, there's a human being here. And he would work with Maskini by questioning him so that he could know himself as a human being first and not just as a beggar. That was powerful stuff. And it was the way Grandpa would ask the questions, that made Maskini reflect so that he could be a human being with a sense of pride and a sense of dignity. He would even encourage Maskini to take responsibility for his own future. Most of us and most of the community around the world just, perhaps if they feel like it, give a donation to the beggar and they go off. They don't know that they've actually passed a human being. Sometimes they perhaps ease their conscience by giving a coin. Or sometimes they'll go on the other side of the street. Right? So Grandpa was wary of that. And in Africa at that time, and this was in colonial years, there were lots of victims of disease. And they didn't have the medical systems we have today. So people ended up being handicapped for life. And Grandpa, when he would ask Maskini to take responsibility for his future, he would also ask Maskini, well, and what do you need in order to do what you're going to do? Not what somebody else says you need, but what do you believe you need? And over the time, Maskini got used to the conversations and the questions. And every time Grandpa put a confronting question that Maskini had to think about, Maskini's favorite response was, Hakuna Matata. Right? Now, in Australia, Hakuna Matata translates as no worries, mate. In England, in Britain, it's no problems, stiff upper lip. In America, it's no issues. Hakuna Matata is all of that, but a lot more. Hakuna, there is no. Matata, troubling. The philosophy behind that is, if you're faced with any kind of circumstances, the last thing you should do, but which we default and do, is to react to the circumstances, good or bad. Hakuna Matata is suggesting that you must calm the mind, still the troubled waters, control the turbulence, and it is from that perspective you get a clearer, balanced picture. You're still looking at the same issue, but you're now seeing it differently. And your response can be more considered. It's a beautiful philosophy in just a simple phrase. And I know it's very much in vogue today, but not everyone gets the opportunity to understand what it actually means. Now, Grandpa was concerned about Maskini, and Maskini had about a 4 to 5 hour commute to get to the point where he sat to beg. So he arranged with one of the shopkeepers to allow Maskini to sleep in the shop front at night for 3 to 4 nights a week. And in return, he had to keep that shop front impeccably clean. And then to help him, Grandpa facilitated Maskini's thinking into selling newspapers. It was the Mombasa Times of those days. And as part of teaching Maskini how to read and write, because he never went to school, we would lend him books and some writing paper, and he would practice. Imagine not having gone to school. He had to learn to count. He had to learn to read. He had to learn English. And what Grandpa used to do was to make Maskini read the newspaper every day, but study it, so that he could recite back the headlines and some of the content without actually looking at the newspaper. So Grandpa would go and visit him every day and say, Maskini, so what's the news for the day? And Maskini would tell him. Imagine, from someone who had not been to school, was able to come up to date with headlines in a newspaper, to be able to read and share it back. And then Grandpa would give him money for about 4 or 5 newspapers, but not take any newspaper, as a way of helping him make some more profit. One day when we were walking down our usual street, Kilindini Road, Grandpa told me that Grandpa's retirement was due shortly. And he would not be in as free a position to help financially with Maskini's needs, like books or something like that. And he was concerned to discuss this with Maskini. So we got to Maskini, and Grandpa told him the situation, and Maskini's response was, Hakuna Matata. And Grandpa said, so what will you do? And he said, I've been thinking about this. I would like to start a business to clean other shop fronts. I've been doing this for a few years now, and when I compare how I keep this shop front to the others, this is very clean, the others are not so clean. So I'd like to start a business. And then he said to Grandpa, Bwana Mzee. That was his way of addressing Grandpa. Bwana is Mr. But in the Swahili language, Mr. Bwana is, I recognize your seniority, I respect you, and may I have permission to ask you something, to talk. So when you say Bwana, you're opening a door. Bwana Mzee, Mzee is old, wise elder. So it's quite an accolade to be addressed, Bwana Mzee. Bwana Mzee, will you help me talk to the other shopkeepers? Grandpa said no. I was a bit shocked. Just at that time, the shopkeeper came out to greet Grandpa. And Grandpa, in a flash, said, oh, good morning, Ibrahim. Have you heard of Maskini's new business idea? And we all looked to Maskini. And Maskini said calmly, Bwana, I would like to start a business cleaning shop fronts. You're a shopkeeper. can you help me talk to other shopkeepers? The shopkeeper said no. Now it's about 10 years old then, and I'm thinking, come on, he's a good man, help him. But in those days growing up, youngsters didn't talk up to the elders. But the shopkeeper saw my concern, and he said, but I tell you what, Maskini, you have been sleeping here for a few years and keeping this shop front clean, and it is better than anywhere else on Kilindini Road. And he said, besides, you sleep here 3 nights a week, sometimes 4. That's like good security for me. I tell you what I'll do. I'll give you a letter of reference. You can take it to the shopkeepers and you ask them to give you a trial. So Grandpa and I went along on our walk to where we were going. Maskini and the shopkeeper went inside the shop. On our way back, a couple of hours later, we didn't see Maskini where we were normally sitting. And we were scanning the horizon and suddenly realized he was way in the distance. Only this time it was as though he was sitting on a spring. He was jumping up and down, waving his arms. I didn't know whether to be concerned or not, but as we got closer, I got a sense of excitement. I was looking up to Grandpa. Shall we run? Not Grandpa. He was cool as a cucumber. He wore his own cloak of Hakuna Matata and just proceeded at his normal pace. Only this time he started humming a tune. I called it his calming humming tune. That's what Grandpa always did. As we got to Maskini, Maskini grabbed Grandpa by the feet and said, Bwana Mzee, you won't believe this. But I talked to 20 shopkeepers and all 20 said they're going to give me a try for 1 month. And he said, after 1 month, Bwana Mzee, you don't have to give me anything. I would like to buy you a cup of chai and 2 mahamris. On the streets, from the Arabic influence, chai was served, very sweet tea, and a couple of mahamris, which is an African sweet bread. It's a street food. I don't like to dwell on it too much because it makes my mouth water and it takes me back to those ages, right? Now, we said the beggar was called Maskini, and that was how society referred to him. The full title is actually Maskini ya Mungu. Now, in colonial days, with the Christian tradition, that became translated as beggar, Maskini, ya, of Mungu, God. And in a kind of way, it was an acceptance from the Christian perspective. But there's a world of philosophy behind that. What it is saying, Maskini, even as a creature of circumstance, you still have a divine self. How beautiful is that compared to just beggar of God? Beggar of God implies that's your fate. Can't change it. Whereas the other way implies you're a creature of circumstance, but you still have some divine aspect, some higher self in you that can allow you to do more than your circumstance. Very powerful. Now let's roll the calendar forward a bit. Not only did Maskini retain those 20 shops after the month, he retained them for a few years, and his empire built to well over 50 shops, including buildings. And now Maskini was employing people, and he was employing mentally handicapped and physically disabled people. Those that could stand up, he would get them to clean the windows and dust the cobwebs. So now Maskini was cleaning the shop fronts, the windows, and the pavements between the shop and the road. What a story is that? Now, throughout town there were lots of other beggars, and they were still begging. Maskini gave some of them employment. Now, that, to me, ladies and gentlemen, is what I believe is a transformation, because an individual recognized his own potential because of the magnanimity of one human being to another. And a few years later, Maskini invited Grandpa to his village. And Grandpa took me along. Well, when we got to the village, Maskini introduced us to his bibi, his wife, and his 3 totos, his 3 children. And they were living in a house that they built. Maskini would make the mud bricks and dry them, and then with some help, get them to the higher level. He and his wife would sit and thatch the coconut palm leaves to make the thatch roof for the house. And when we visited them, they were already planning an extension. That is transformation. And I suggest that all of us, as human beings, are also creatures of circumstance. Whatever those circumstances are, there is the potential within us to cause us to rise up and transform our lives. In 1968, my family left Kenya. It was about 5 months after Grandpa passed away, and we moved to live in the UK. There we were, and the top right-hand corner is me at the age 17 when I was still growing hair on the top of my head. Okay. Grandpa was Mum's father, and there's my dad. Mum was a teacher, and again, Mum had this knack of working with students who just couldn't get something like arithmetic or algebra or maths. No other teachers could succeed, but she did, because she communicated to the human being and not just the child going to school. Dad was a humble clerical worker. He was pulled out of school at the age of 11 because his father died and they couldn't afford to send him to school. So he made his own way, the way he could, and after work, he would give first aid to all the local Africans who couldn't afford to go and get treatment, whether it was cuts, bruises, sores, or whatever. He used to use a disinfectant. He would have bandages, plasters to treat them, right? Nobody asked him to. So I can say with some pride that I was influenced by some pretty powerful thinking and feeling people. In 1993, after my parents had passed away, I emigrated to Perth in Western Australia. And very soon afterwards, I met a man called ROQUE. Now, ROQUE actually did his early growing up in Mombasa in Kenya too. I didn't know him, I was too young, but he remembers my parents and my siblings all as part of the church community. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was our love of tools or our love of DIY. If something was broken, we'd like to have a go and fix it. And if we couldn't fix it, well, that was a good experiment in learning how things work, didn't it? And if it was a total disaster, well, we had spare parts for future projects, didn't we? You know, that was our excuse anyway. ROQUE and I developed a very special and close relationship, and he often would phone me or talk to me about problems he was having, you know, things broken, how to fix them, or he was struggling with a problem, how should he approach it? And we developed a very good rapport, and that continued. I moved to Melbourne a few years later, and ROQUE still remained in Perth, and he would phone me. And by now we had developed a technique. Well, he was at one end of the phone, I was at the other. We'd have our pieces of paper ready, we'd write the date, the name of the person we were talking to, and the subject. And ROQUE was a brilliant note taker, and he always followed through. As a coach now, I reflect back, ROQUE was the ultimate coachee. He followed up. And if there was something he didn't understand, he would come back and ask the question, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. Anyway, he phoned me one day and he said, "Joseph, my garage door won't close anymore. Can you help?" What was my response? Hakuna Matata, right? So I began to ask ROQUE some questions. Has the hinge broken? Has someone bumped into the garage door? I had to ask him that question because he himself bumped into his own garage door a couple of times. Has the wood rotten, right? And during the times I was asking the questions, if he hadn't actually seen that, he would say, "Hold on a minute." He would put the phone down, run outside the house, go to the garage, have a look, and come back and tell me the answer. And he did that a few times. And whilst I was waiting in that downtime, I started doodling, as one does, right? And on one of those times, I wrote ROQUE's name as a bit of a mind map, yeah, ROQUE. And the minute I'd done that, I had a great aha moment, right? And I could see Grandpa's questioning and wisdom to Maskini in ROQUE's name. And that had a bit of a transformative effect on me. You see, Grandpa would always say, when there was a problem, or even talking to Maskini, "So what's really going on here?" Not what you think it is, not what somebody else is saying. What do you think is going on here? Right? And then Grandpa would always say, "And there's always something you can do. Always. Don't just look at what's in front of you. Look at what's in the marginals. Tolerate the marginals." And he said, when you've done that, look behind you as well. And if you can't look behind you, ask somebody. And another tidbit from ancient wisdom tradition is the first step into solving a problem is to accept that you have a problem. How many of us are in denial mode? I didn't do it, not my fault, his fault, her fault. But when you accept that you've got a problem, suddenly your mind is open and more receptive to ideas from other people. That's why networking works so well. That's why group working and collaboration works so well, if the mind is open, right? And so for me, R stood for reality now. What's really going on? You can take any problem in your life, in your business, whatever. What's really going on now, right? Clear the noise. O stands for options. So based on what you've identified as the reality, what options do you see as presenting themselves? And then when you've chosen something, Grandpa would always say to Maskini, "Now, are you sure you want to do this?" When Maskini wanted to do this cleaning business. That struck a chord with me. What Grandpa was saying is, are you saying you want to do this because that's what you want me to hear? Or do you really mean it? Now that, to me, triggered by the letter Q, was the word quest. In life, we need to do things with a congruence of head and heart. How many times have we say, "Look, I've got to do that, and I set out a plan to do that, but my heart's not really in it." Chances of success are limiting. And on the other hand, if we are passionate about something and we go madly out to do it, but we haven't thought it through logically, we might miss a trick here and there. So the idea is to have a congruence of head and heart in any decision you make. Goal setting fails because there is a mismatch between head and heart. New Year's Eve and New Year's Day resolutions fail because they're spontaneous, on-the-day commitments, and they have nothing really to back them up. So having a quest is pretty serious stuff. It doesn't mean to say it's got to be a 50-50 balance between head and heart. No, it's got to be a congruence. Now, once you have decided on a quest, and with head and heart you're going to embark on it, Grandpa would also say, what do you need to put in place or to do or to fix before you can achieve the quest? And the letter U inspired me to think of, so what are the unique needs that need to be put in place before you can embark on the quest? Let's say my quest is to bake a cake. What do I need? I need the ingredients. I need to have an oven that I can bake the cake, a mixing bowl and all of that stuff. But I also need the recipe. And I also need some know-how. So get all of that sorted out, and then you can bake the cake. And E comes from my corporate experience, your execution strategy. So once you've explored the reality of what's happening now, and you've looked at the options, and from those options you've chosen a quest, you've identified what the needs are in order to help deliver that quest, you then have an execution commitment that says, what exactly are you going to do, by when, how much, how big, and how will you hold yourself accountable, and to whom? That's where a lot of business plans fail when business owners create business plans, because there is no accountability to anybody else. That's why businesses have mentors or coaches, somebody else you can be held accountable to, right? So execution is very important, but accountability is even more powerful. So now we had ROQUE, a man's name, become an acronym. And I've been using that now for several years, and it's currently being used in many countries around the world. And out of that, so that methodology is there free for anybody to use, and out of that was developed the ROQUE Model. Now the ROQUE Model actually asks every individual, hands up all of you here who are human beings. The chances are, if you are human, you've had parents. And if you've had parents, the chances are you've had grandparents. And you've probably had uncles, aunts, cousins, nephews, nieces. And as you've grown up, you've probably had a partner yourself and children yourself. And you play a role in community, in business. What that is saying is, by virtue of the fact that you are a human being, you are destined, forget it, no choice, you are destined to have relationships with other people. You cannot exist as an island on your own. And I have a saying, if you look at my LinkedIn profile, that says, there's no such thing as business, company, organization, or corporation. There's only human beings having meaningful conversations with other human beings. Even widgets are produced as a result of meaningful conversations with other people. Now, in order to sustain that relational side of your life, so you've got yourself as a human being, you've got your relationship side, you have to do something. You can work, you can start a business, self-employed, have a career, have a vocation, and that helps you sustain that relational side of you. And if it all works well, that helps in the fulfillment you derive as a human being. So with ROQUE, the ROQUE model, we ask, identify clearly that you are a human being, you have a relational self, and you have a professional self. What is the reality in each of those areas for you right now? What's going well? As a human being, how fulfilled are you? What's missing? In your relational life, what's working? What's not working? What could go better? And in your professional life, are you still in the career you set out? Are you still doing the business you were passionate about once? And then what options do you have in each of those areas? And based on those options, what is your quest going to be? And once you've identified the quest, what do you need to put in place before that quest can become a reality? And then finally, how are you going to execute for each of those? My dream for ROQUE is that it becomes part of the personal development and professional development vocabulary. Already it's nice. I see some Twitter feeds of, my world is rocked, ROQUED, or I can help you rock your world. Some clients, as a thank you, have given me t-shirts with the word rock, or they talk about how rock has helped. So I'd like it to become part of that vocabulary. I'd like it to inspire leadership in anybody, because any one of us is a leader at some stage in our life, sometimes more often than others. So I have some questions for you. Who is Uncle Castellino in your life? That was the name of someone in my life. The allegory there is, who is that person in your life from when you were young, or could be somebody today, who actually saw in you something you perhaps didn't see yourself, but perhaps others saw as well. And I guarantee you that we all have an Uncle Castellino in our lives. Wake up to that. Identify that. That might be a trigger to inspire you to say, if that person saw that I could do this, perhaps I can. Right? Who is grandpa in your life? Could be grandma, could be another person. But who is the person who actually you were able to witness changing somebody's life? And what can you learn from that? What inspiration can you draw from that story? Have you met the Maskini ya Mungu that is in you? I've already said, creature of circumstance with a divine elevation within. We all have a Maskini within us. Is that Maskini waiting for you? Is he waiting to inspire you when you discover him? Or is he waiting for you to inspire him? And for me, that's the giant within. Can we awaken that giant? That is us. That is our right. And do you know where to go to find Hakuna Matata? That place, that space, where when you go there, no matter what you're facing, you can still those troubled waters. You can calm the mind. So that with that different perspective, with that paradigm shift, you can approach what you were facing with a different mindset. We all have those spaces. We call them different things. Yeah? And finally, where is your leader? Is your leader in there? Or is your leader out there? Are you leading your life? Or are you following somebody else? It's very powerful. In Swahili, for thank you very much, they say asante sana. So from me to you all, asante sana. Thank you.